This is Gemara in Kesubos, Daf Ayin Dalid of learning for this month. The month of Elul has been generously sponsored as incredible Lezchot Neshama. Pastor Reyzel Basra Meir, Mir Tashan learning entire Chabura, should bring us Reyzel Basra Meir to an higher in place in Gan Eden and Shel Mailam. And we pick it up. We're holding on. Ayin Gimel and Beis, in the middle of a lengthy discussion on Machlekes Abaya in Rabbah as to what is the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. And the question is, we originally explained the sheet of Abaya that he learned, the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel, is whether we say, Eina de Moisa Bilasai Bilas Nos, whether we assume that a person would never make his act of consummation into his act of tashmish into a znos, or do we say no? And that's how Abaya explained the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Rabbah came along and Rabbah said no. That is not the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Rather, the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel is when one marries two women. The first woman, he made a tanai that you have no nadarim. The second woman, he made no such tanai. But is the fact that he made the tanai with the first woman indicative that he's really makbid, that his wife doesn't have nadarim? And of course, the question is, now he finds out that the second wife actually has nidarim. So what do we do right now? Do we say the fact that he made the tanai with the first woman is enough to show that he didn't want nidarim with the second woman, and therefore there's an issue with the second marriage, or no? So Abaya had two questions that we ended off yesterday's share with, and now Abaya continues. So we're on Ayin Gimel and Beis, about 10 lines to the bottom. The first word on the line is Adaita de Kedushin. Esvei asks Abaya, if a man says to a woman, I'm going to sleep with you, we're going to have tashmish, in order to get married, of course, in order to fek kedushin, there's 3 ways to get married, kesef, shtar, and bia. So he says, I want to get married to you via bia on the condition that what? My father says it's okay. Says the Rייzel, even though the father does not want, they're still married. Says Shimon Yehuda, it's dependent upon whether or not the father wants. So that's a brisa. Now explains the Abaya. Over here, this is comparable to a case of one woman having an issue, because we see over here there weren't two women. There wasn't such a scenario in which he made Tanai with one woman and not the second, but rather the Tanai was made with the exact same woman. And what do we see? We see that there's still a machlekes whether they're married. Upligi, we see the Tanakhama and Shimon and Yehuda argue. So seemingly this argues in Rabbah, because the whole premise of Rabbah was that the only time we're going to have a machlekes is when it is two women, or when it is similar to two women. But Rabbah held that whenever it is one person, it's obvious that he did not waive, he was not Meichel, his Tanai, and since in this scenario the father did not consent, everyone should agree the Kedushin is not valid. So the fact that we see that there is a machlekes whether or not the Kedushin is indeed Chal, is indeed married, we see now like Rabbah asks Abaya. Answers the Gemara, Rabbah again deflects and says, no, the reason why the rice is different, what did this man mean when he said, on condition that my father consents? So one mandamar holds that means that if the father is quiet, that's enough. Umar Savar, and the other mandamar holds no. The father has to say yes. So it's an internal machlekes, explains Rabbah, as to what were the words of the condition when this man goes to a woman, sleeps with her in order to affect kedushin, and says, my father has to consent, my father has to agree. Did he mean that his father has to agree explicitly, or is implicit being quiet enough? And therefore Rabbah again deflects the challenge and says that this is not indicative that everyone would agree in such a scenario that they are not married, because he would be Meichel the Tanai. Esvei Abaya continues. We're now holding 5 lines to the bottom. Says the Rייzel, The Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Eliezer in a scenario with a ketana who's married off by a father, v'nisgarsha. And then what happened? And then she was divorced, meaning her father accepted a get for her. V'yasayma b'chayav. And as we learned extensively in the Gemara Yevamos, this is what was considered that she is a Yisayma. A Yisayma means she has no father. But over here, since she got married and then divorced, she has the status of a Yisayma. She has the status of an orphan in the lifetime of her father. V'chzira. And then what happened? Her original husband comes back and marries her again. And then that husband dies. So what is her status? Because she has a very unique status. On one hand, she got remarried. And she got remarried at a time that she had full control over herself because she had previously gotten married and divorced. Or do we say no? At the end of the day, she is a kitana. So says the Brisa, that what's the story? She has to chalitza to the brother, or I should say the brother has to chalitza to her, and not Yibam. Why? Because the original Gerushin, the father accepted a get on her behalf. That was absolute. But says the Gemara, the Chazara, her act of remarried was not complete. So now explains Abaya, is when she got divorced and remarried all while she was a Gitana. Let's say she got divorced while being a Gitana. But then she got remarried while she was an adult. Or she actually got remarried when she was Gitana. But then but then she grew up and now she is a Gedayla with that husband who meis, and now he dies. Then explains the Brisa, she can do Chalitza or she can do Yibam. And now who argues? As we turn over to Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph. Even in this case, she has to do Chalitza and not Yibam. So explains the Gemara, now is where Abaya jumps in. But over here, this is all involving one woman. What was the toyus in this case? Was the fact that she got married while being a kitana, which does not work on a daraisa level. And now the question is, then she was together with her husband when she was a gedayla. As we said, v'gadla etzlai, she stayed married to him and then grew up. And now the question is the fact that she stayed married to him and she became a gedayla, is that act of staying married when they slept together, is that considered a kedushin? Upligi. And we have a machlaikas. So again, Abayas Rabba, according to you, Rabba, everyone should agree that in such a case, that it is not a kedushin. Answers the Gemara, Hasanami, Rabba deflects again, everyone knows that what he did while they were Kedanin is nothing. Meaning, don't bring me a raya from this case to a regular case of tashmish between husband and wife. Because in this case, everyone knows that the marriage that was while they were Ketana, she was a minor, is nothing. So now when they're together, when she's a grown up, that act, everyone has intent for Kedushin. No, people do not necessarily know that detail. And when they were together, it was with the mindset of the original Kedushin. So again, Rabbah deflects and says that this Braisa is a side machlaikas. This Braisa is a machlaikas whether people are aware that Kedusha Ketana is nothingness or not, and whether they have the mindset at a latter Kedushin in order to, a latter Tashmish when they're Gedayla, to affect a Kedushin or not. After all the questions on Rabbah holds his own. Finally says the Gemara, Tmanami, Harayo to Rabbah. Someone does Kedushin, Erisin with conditions, Ubal, and then they're together without saying anything. Just like Rabbah said, both Rav and Shmuel would both agree they do not need a get. Why? Because the marriage is nothing. Why is the marriage nothing? Because even though they were together, they were a Baal without any stipulations. The fact that he made the stipulation at the time of Erusin stands, and the subsequent Tashmish is almost meaningless, and therefore everyone agrees they do not need to get when they find out that she indeed has Nadarim, because the marriage is void. So says the Gemara, and again, let's just remember our names. This was Rav Achar bar Yaakov in the name of Rav Yochanan, concurring to the opinion of Rabbi. Eisvei asked the Gemara Rav Achar bar Rav Ika bar Achtei. Asked the Gemara Rav Acha's his sister's son of Ravika. Asked Rav Achar bar Yaakov from the following brayso. Chalitza mutas kisheira. Says in the brayso, and this is of course something that we learned together in Yevamos. Says the brayso, chalitza mutas. Someone does chalitza by mistake, which we'll explain what this means in a moment. It's kosher. Ezei chalitza mutas. What does this refer to? Amrei shlakish el shomer loi chalitzla ubekach ata kansa. If someone says, let's do an act of chalitza, and via the chalitza, you're going to be married, which of course is not the correct mechanics. Chalitza severs and removes the bond between woman and brother. But they said, let's do it on condition to be married. Explains Rav Yochanan, whether he had intent and not her, whether she had intent and not him, it doesn't work until they both have kavanah. That is what Rav Yochanan says. And Rav Yochanan continues, it says, and you're suggesting that the chalitza is kosher? How can you say that? If the fact that they did chalitza thinking it's kedushin, that's going to make it work. Elam Rav Yochanan, rather Rav Yochanan explains that's not what I meant. Kol sha'imer loy cholotz la menas, shetitein la masayim zos. Rather the case is, you know what, chalitza mutas. When the brayso there says chalitza, that's my mistake, it refers to, where he says do chalitza, so that she gives you 200 zuz. So in this case, they had in mind that the chalitza should work, even though they didn't necessarily receive the money. That's what this chalitza mutas is, and that's the reason why the brayso is teaching us that it is kosher, meaning it is kosher even if the 200 zuz is not given. Now explains the Gemara, and this is going to be the kasher Rachav Ravika Alma. Kima David Maisa Chuli Achla Tanai. Hachanami Kima Dabal Achla Tanai. So ask the Gemara Rav Ika or Rav Achar bar Yaakov, excuse me, that what do we see? We see that once you do a Maisa, it shows that the original condition is nothing. So I asked the Gemara, how can you, Rav Achar bar Yaakov, concur with Rabbah that the subsequent Tashmish does not show that the original Kedushin al Tanai is nothing? We see clearly in our brayso that you're of the opinion that doing a subsequent Maisa makes the original Tanai nothing. So Rav Achar bar Yaakov responds, excuse me, one second. Rav Achar bar Yaakov responds, Omar lei Barbe Rav Shaber Ka'amrit. He responds to him and says, Barbe Rav. He's talking to his nephew. Yutama Chacham Shaber Ka'amrit. Are you asking a good question? Meaning, the reason a brayso says the chalitza is good, you're saying is because he's meichel tanai. Is that really the reason? Mechdi. Let's see. Kol tanai meichel gamrinan. Where do we learn how to tanai from? Tanai b'nei Gad b'nei Ruvain. From the story, b'nei Gad b'nei Ruvain didn't want to cross over to Eretz Yisrael, and therefore they were made a tanai, a condition with them what they had to do in order to receive their land, Ever Yardain. Tano, definitely kiyum adei shliach, and kiyasam avi tanai. And from there we learn out a very important rule. We learn out all the rules of conditions of tanaim from the story of b'nei Gad b'nei Ruvain. So explains Rav Achar bar Yaakov. We learn out from there that only if you have a condition, a tanai, that's possible to be filled via a shliach, that is good tanai. But any tanai that cannot potentially be filled via a shliach is not a good tanai. So the reason why the chalitza mutas, the chalitza and condition that you give 200 is not good, is why? Because since chalitza is an entity unto its own, the chalitza cannot be done via a shliach, which of course is based on the entire sugi of chalitza we learned in Ivamos. But you can never tell a shliach if someone gives you 200 zuz, then you can do chalitza for me, because the chalitza has to be done only by the yavam. So that's why Rabbi Bar Yaakov says, in this case, the Tanai is no good. Responds the Gemara, 1 second. But Tashmish, of course, is an entity which cannot be done via shliach, and yet we know that if someone does kiddushin with the Tanai, with the Kedushin, that he wants it to work, the Kedushin should only be effected via Tashmish. We know it works. Yet you're telling me that no Tanai in the world should ever work if the Tanai cannot be fulfilled via Shliach. And this Tanai certainly cannot be fulfilled via Shliach. Explains the Gemara, no. The reason over there that it works, making a Tanai via Tashmish, is because we compare all the different ways of getting married, as we said at the beginning of today's shir. There are 3 ways to get married. Learned out from the pasuk Vayisli Shacher. We learn out that the 3 ways of getting married, kesef, shtar, and bia, all are equal. And since kesef and shtar could be done via a shliach, one could give money, one could accept the document via a messenger, even though you cannot perform tashmish, of course, via messenger to get married. Still, a kedushin with tanai for tashmish would indeed work. So the Gemara's question of Bar Yaakov falls off. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ula bar Abba, Amar Ula, Amar Rav Elazar, Mekadesh b'milva u'baal. Seemingly random, but a first cousin to what we're discussing. If someone gets married, b'milva, someone gets married with a loan, u'baal, and then he's together with this woman, meaning, someone says, let's call it Reuven says to Rachel, be married to me with the money that I had previously lent you. And instead, meaning he doesn't actually give her money for Kedushin, doesn't actually give her the ring, but rather he says, the money that I once upon a time lent you, that money is yours, and with that, we're going to get married. And then what happens? Ubal, and then they are together. Asks this Bryce Al-Tanai, or if someone says, another case, I'm marrying you with a Tanai, and then he sleeps with her, and they never did the Tanai. Or they try to get married with less than a Shavapruta, which of course does not work, and then they slept together. Everyone agrees they are considered married, even though the original words that were said at the time of Erusin were not fulfilled. But since Ubal, subsequently they slept together, everyone agrees they're married. Similarly, the same din, they need to get a get. And over here, now the Gemara says, why did Rav Ami say it's only the case of Bachs B'Shava Pruta? Because only in this case, people never make a mistake. People don't actually think you could get married with less than a Shava Pruta. So therefore, when they slept together, that showed that they didn't care about the Tanai. But Rav Ami says the other entities, the other conditions that he made, that he wants to get married with a loan, or al Tanai, and then they slept together, does not mean that he wants to forego his original Tanai. A machlokes how far we take this principle that their subsequent act of Tashmish forgoes the original Tanai. Similarly, the same din, if they got married with his Tanai, but then they were together, it's considered that they are married, even if the original Tanai was not fulfilled. This is a story, says the Raisa, and the Chacham did not have the power to lease her without a get. The Gemara explains, that which we just saw in the Brayso of Rav Kahana Mishmei De'ula, that the Chacham did not have a power to release that case without a get, that comes to exclude from the following Tana. Asura. 4 lines in the Brayso, bottom of the Amud, the Brayso learns out of the name of Yishmael. The pasuk says with regard to a woman who were suspecting to be that was Mizaneh, and she was not forced. Then the halacha is that she's not let to stay with her husband. hanit basa. But we know that if a woman is ma'anes, if a woman is raped, then mutaris, she's allowed to stay with her husband. Mutaris is another woman that even though she was not forced, is allowed, even though she was forced, even though she was not forced, even though it was consensual, she's still allowed to stay with her husband. What's this case? If she got married by mistake, there was a condition that got messed up. That even if her son is riding on her shoulder, as we turn over to Ayin Dalet Amud Beis, another short Amud. What's the halacha? The halacha is she could refuse and walk away because she could walk away from the marriage and there's no need for a get. According to Rav Yishmael, we do not assume, again, the fact that they were together means that they wanted to waive the original Tanai, and since he never fulfilled the Tanai, she's allowed to just walk out of the marriage. So what do we see when all is said is done? There certainly are cases if a man marries a woman al Tanai and they later on have tashmish together, it is a point of debate by a rabbi what exactly happens. But continues the Gemara, what we learned in our Mishnah is that if a woman has nidarim, or if a woman has a mum, that could indeed make the original kedusha nachal. So says the Gemara, what about if a woman does something after the marriage? We're going to start the next Gemara, and with this we're going to conclude. Tanu Rabbanan on the top line of Ayin Dalet Amud Beis. What happens? A man, again, the same case, they got married al Tanai, that she has no Nadarim, and she had Nadarim, but then she went to the Chacham and she got rid of her Nadarim. So now what's the halacha? She's a woman without Nadarim. Mekudeshes, they are married. Let's say they got married and she had a mum, but then she went to a doctor and got healed. Einoi Mekudeshes, then they don't stay married. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Ma'abin Chacham, the Raifa, what's the difference? A very fundamental principle in all of Nedarim we get to learn right now from this Gemara. Explains the Gemara, Chacham oikers an eder lemafreya. That a Chacham, when he gets rid of the neder, he makes it subsequently. He makes it as if she never had the neder. And since she never had the neder, they're married. But the doctor only heals them from this moment and onward. And therefore, indeed, she had a moment when they got married. And therefore, the marriage, einoi mikudeshes. Ask the Gemara about Tanya. We learned in the Brayse, the Brayse puts them both together. Oh my Rabbi Loikash, or Meir, or Rabbi Lazar. Oh, Meir, the Mother Bezdin. One is the condition, the din. The first price is Meir, who said a man is okay with having his wife be embarrassed in Bezdin, and therefore when he made it tonight that she has no Nidarim, he did not mean to say that the marriage is no longer if she could go and be made for the Nadarim. Person never wants his wife to have to embarrass herself by going to Bezdin. And therefore, what was the husband's condition when he said, Amanas, you have no Nadarim? They have no Nadarim. She could go to Bezdin and be made for the Nadar. No, the husband does not want that. Comes out a little bit interesting. He'd rather divorce her. But the husband does not want his wife to go to Bezdin to annul the vow. Therefore, even though she did actually go find that Pesach and get rid of the vow, Lamaisa, there is Eino Mikudeshes due to the original Tanai. Says the Gemara, Maihi, what is this Machlekes Rameir and Rav Lazar? The Tanai and there to the Mishnah. Hamoiti is Misham Neder. If someone divorces his wife because of a Neder, Lo Yachzer, they cannot get remarried. Misham Shemra. If someone divorces his wife because there were suspected rumors about her, Lo Yachzer, they cannot get remarried. Rav Yudaimer. Kol neder shedabar rabim lo yachzer, lo yodabar rabim yachzer. Says if you don't know, it depends. Is this a neder that people knew about? If it's a neder that people knew about, then indeed they can't get remarried. But if it's a neder that no one knew about, then he's allowed to remarry her. And here's Rameir Oimer kol neder shedar chakiras chacham lo yachzer. Anything that needs a chacham to get rid of, then says Rameir, he doesn't mind. Adam roikshes is baza ishtay bebezdin. And therefore, kol nechzar chakiras chacham lo yachsir. V'sheinazar chakiras chacham yachsir. Whereas Rav Eliezer Omer, echad tzarich v'echad einay tzarich lo yachsir. Rav Eliezer says in either case doesn't make a difference. Why? Because the person never wants his wife to go to Bezdin, and therefore says Rav Eliezer, whether it needs a chacham or not, they cannot lo yachsir. You cannot remarry her. So what do we see? We see that this Mishnah is the makar that Rameir and Rav Elazar are arguing whether a person wants his wife to be embarrassed in Bezdin. But the Gemara is going to explain this. But before we actually explain that brayso, the Gemara gets involved. Amar Rav Elazar loy asru sarich al memnei she'enai tzarich. Different l'shaynes, whether we read the parentheses or not, or we say that Rav Elazar holds that loy asru, they forbade them only from getting remarried in a case tzarich, when you need a chacham. Why? It's the same din. Rav Elazar holds in both cases in under Moshe Bezdin. We're going to explain this machlekes Rav Meir and Rav Elazar a little bit further. But first, the Gemara is going to dive into Shitas Rav Yehuda. My time is Rav Yehuda, but we'll pick it up from here in the next year. B'siyata d'ishmaya.